For NHD this year, the theme was communication in history. Communication is defined as a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. With that in mind, me and Josue wanted to look into different codes and ciphers to see how important they have been and how they've evolved over time. There are different types of communication, and over time, these types of communication have evolved. From using feather and ink, to handwriting with pencils and pens, to printing by each letter, and eventually printing full pages, it has made life a lot easier, and the tools we use have become more efficient. So by comparing writing to coding, we can follow the same plot line. While most of the codes we are going to discuss are able to be solved by people, some are machine-made and some aren't even solved to this day. Before we get started, here are some words you need to know. Cipher, a secret or disguised way of writing. Code, system of words, letters, figures, or other symbols substituted for other words, letters, etc., especially for the purposes of secrecy. Monoalphabetic cipher, a type of cipher that would take shifts from the alphabet and put them into a cipher format. Ciphertext, encrypted word, after a cipher has been used on plaintext. Plaintext, text that is not computationally tagged, specially formatted, or written in code, basically normal words. Keystream, the key but repeated without spaces, typically for longer messages to be encoded. Let's start with the first code, the Caesar shift cipher, which is the first documented code to be used in battle. In 50 BC, Julius Caesar, a Roman general, needed to communicate secrets to his lower generals. Although it sounds impressive, the first cipher to be used in battle, it's really easy. It was so easy that they started using the code in the newspaper, The Times, in the 19th century. To use this code, you make 2 lines of the alphabet and shift one down a space to make it shift once. Doing so would make ABC become BCD, and YZA become ZAB, so it's the easiest cipher to solve. However, this code has been adapted to become harder to crack by many people, including Julius Caesar's nephew, Germans, and Russians. It's historically important, and often the first code people learn to decode when looking into ciphers, but it's not the best, and definitely not the last. Next we have the Vigenère cipher. It was a cipher made by Blaise Vigenère, a French diplomat, and was part of the monoalphabetic ciphers. It was made in 1585 and was eventually named after Blaise when people discovered who made it. Still, it wasn't a common use cipher until the Civil War, where it was used by the Confederate troops and used as a field cipher on discs. While it is really hard to solve as a disk, and often called impossible by mathematicians because of the variety of keys and setups, we can solve the most common setup. Looking at this key, it starts with A in the top left corner and moves over on the top and left side going down the alphabet. The A and A combine to make the first letter in the cipher an A. Then it goes diagonal for each letter, which makes each new row start with the next letter in the alphabet. Next we use the key stream in plaintext to encode a word or sentence. I used the word dog and the key blue. D and B met at E, O and L met at Z, and G and U met at A. For longer messages, you would use more of the key stream. Blue would become BLUE, repeating. So to encode a new message, using a new cipher, we use the plaintext word alliteration, and the key stream. A becomes B, L becomes W, I becomes M, and so on. So alliteration becomes this. So just in between these two codes, in a span of almost 1700 years, the way these codes were used has evolved. For the next cipher, it's a bit different. For the past two, we use shifts to swap letters for other letters. But this cipher, the Pigpen cipher, swaps letters for symbols. The Pigpen cipher, also known as the Rosicrucian cipher or Freemason cipher, was used in the 18th century primarily by Freemasons and was used to keep rights and records private. Freemasons are very secretive, so for this cipher to be trusted, it had to be good. While it is recognized for its unique symbols, that is a strength and weakness, because while it may be hard to figure it out at first, it's really simple once you learn to decode, because there's nothing really like it. You can recognize it really easily. Its only strong point back then was that most people were illiterate and couldn't read, let alone decrypt a message. Once more people were becoming literate, it was used by Union prisoners in Confederate prison camps, and now it is used by prisoners and people in the crime underworld. Overall, it was used by a lot of people in many different ways, so no matter how secure it has been of use to various people.
Next, we have a combination of 2 ciphers. They were both used during World War II, just by different sides. The Enigma cipher was used by the Axis powers, and the Playfair cipher was used by the Allied powers. The Playfair cipher was used by British forces during the Second Boer War in 1899 until 1902, and in World War I in 1914 until 1918. Other countries, including Australia, Germany, and New Zealand, would use the Playfair cipher in the 1940s, aka World War II. This cipher was even used once by John F. Kennedy during the war. This cipher was invented in 1854 by Charles Wheatstone and was the first practical digraph substitution cipher.
It was also incredibly easy to use because it doesn't require equipment and encrypts pairs of letters instead of single letters in a fast manner. This cipher was named after Lord Playfair.
The Enigma ciphering system was used by Germans, the Japanese, and Italians in World War II. Enigma isn't a single cipher, but a brand that was known for having a set of rotatable wheels that get scrambled. Each model is different and makes a different code. The name is said to be from the Enigma variations of English composer Edward Elgar.
They are both very important and simple. The Enigma cipher being cracked by the Allies was actually one of the most decisive parts of World War II because it held so many secrets and plans.
The Playfair cipher helped convey secrets between Allied powers about ships that went down and other things like that.
For the last cipher, we see an introduction to common ciphers and the general public's use of ciphers. Most of these ciphers were used in war or to communicate secrets, but they always end up in the public, either being used or researched by some college professor or by a criminal in prison. Either way, it made it to the public and people began using them. This, however, is a special case of criminality meeting ciphers. The Zodiac Killer cryptograms are regarded as some of the hardest criminal-made ciphers, with some of them remaining unsolved for over 50 years. The Zodiac Killer, who has not yet been identified, sent over 20 letters to police and the press, some of which contain ciphers. These are very important because they gave a look into what type of person the killer was. They have 7 confirmed kills, 2 attempted, and claimed to have killed 37, and believed their victims would become their slaves in the afterlife. We found all of this out through the ciphers, and yet some haven't been solved. It may not be a war cipher, but it's still historically significant because most people don't go around creating ciphers, and most people don't go around killing people, so for someone to combine these two and not get caught is interesting. Also, this being such a popular case lends to the fact that most people are confused by the ciphers, especially since ones that have already been solved are still hard to understand by the public, and the ones that have been released to the public aren't really talked about very much besides their difficulty. It was also another cipher that exchanged letters for symbols. Going back through these codes, you can see the evolution. As people got smarter, more literate, and more creative, the ciphers got harder to crack. From shifting letters around to making up symbols and using them in war, religion, and crime and murder, the ways we communicate has evolved into something crazy, and I hope we continue to come up with new things.